Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani, and welcome back to this YouTube channel that takes on narcissism. It's my hope that this channel will not only help you understand narcissism, but a lot of the patterns and themes that are associated with it, so you can get information that'll help you navigate the really difficult territory of these relationships, or at a minimum, just understand it further. So we've been doing a series of videos on healthy versus unhealthy relationships because a lot of people say, I've been in an unhealthy relationship so long, I think I've lost all sense of what a healthy relationship should look like. So the goal of this series is to really sort of show you what happens, you already know kind of, but talk about what happens, the themes of narcissistic relationships, and then contrast it to what happens in a healthy relationship. Well, let's talk about something that happens in just about every narcissistic relationship there is. They will use your vulnerabilities against you. Now, something that often gets forgotten about in the love bombing phase is that it's during the love bombing phase that something that is actually quite dangerous happens in narcissistic relationships. It's a process that I term the unveiling of the vulnerabilities. In fact, as part of love bombing, some narcissistic people will actually go fishing for these vulnerabilities. They'll stare into your eyes and ask you, "What's your greatest fear?" Or, "What are you most worried about?" Or, "What don't you like about yourself?" You'll think, ooh, this is the beautiful sharing of love. This is what a relationship should be, talking about stuff deep. And I'm in something now with someone who wants to go deep and have these deep conversations. The narcissist may even play with you a little and share some of their vulnerabilities, though I'm not so sure they're giving you a true look at theirs. But the vulnerabilities may be shared, and a good love bomber may even promise to forever protect you and keep you safe, and some such fiction. If you do try to pull the narcissist's vulnerabilities out, they may pull a clever gambit saying something like, "Oh, come on. I'm happy to talk about it, but you never get to talk. You're always the kind of person who makes time for other people. Now it's your turn to share about yourself." They're just like the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood. All the better to use them against you in the future, my dear. But they don't say it. They just let you talk. And then the day comes, and it will come. Maybe it'll start in the devalue part of the relationship. It will definitely happen in the discard. And it sure as hell will happen if you don't fall for the Hoover. They will use your vulnerabilities against you. They will use every wound, fear, trauma, secret that you ever mentioned to them. All will be mobilized and turned into weaponry, and then bam. The way they do this might come in through really awful emails, text messages, letters, phone messages, or just in good old-fashioned conversation. They will go after anything that is one of your vulnerabilities. They will go after your appearance, or your work, or your parenting, or your friends, or your family, or your mental health, or your physical health, or your traumas. Anything they know will get to you. It's actually a cruel and clever gambit. They use precisely the one weapon you cannot fight back against. You are often so blindsided that somebody would do this or could do this that you're not able to easily recover when you see that someone's doing this to you. And your sympathetic nervous system reactions will kick in. If you have any history of trauma and someone does this to you, it is really difficult to recover, a sort of overwhelming with emotion that can leave you frozen, depressed, detached, and in the most severe cases, even dissociated. The narcissistic personality and their constant monitoring of the world around them for threats, their use of projective defenses, coupled with their tendency towards vindictiveness, but all of this happening against a background of being quite interpersonally cunning and calculating is what underlies them doing this. There is not a single narcissistic or high conflict personality person I have ever heard of in which this mobilization and weaponization of another person's vulnerabilities does not occur at some point. Every divorce, every family bust up, every business or workplace dismantling. When the relationship goes south with a narcissist, watch out. Any confidence, weakness, secret, or vulnerability will be played back for you to shame you. It is actually one of their most gruesome plays, and is often the one that when I work with survivors, they will often say to me, "This was the final hammer's blow." Now that you know that they're capable of this, it really begs forever the question, is this ever going to be a healthy place to hang out? All trust is gone after that. I leave clients to decide for themselves, right? Some people go back. But even when you go back to any kind of human relationship where someone could do this to you, the relationships remain eggshell and betrayal-ridden wastelands. This, using your vulnerabilities against you, is really poisonous when it comes from a parent. They know exactly your vulnerabilities because they have been there from the very beginning. They know the things that scare you at night. Your tendency to wet your bed, your struggles with weight, your experiences with bullying, your lisp, your challenges with math, even your trauma histories. And a narcissistic parent, if the battles between you and them get dark enough, they'll go there. This has actually been some of the worst narcissistic abuse that I've ever seen, as a person is forced to grapple with childhood wounds that happen to a child's mind, but have to manage it on an adult battlefield. This approach of weaponizing and using a person's vulnerabilities against them will also often be used in divorces. Somewhere in your 20-year marriage, you may have shared who knows what, a youthful indiscretion, a wild night you had when you were young and hadn't even met your partner yet. And yet, in a deposition or other court proceeding, you will be painted as a wild partier, or as a person of weak moral character, or as a person who is struggling with addiction. In the workplace, this also becomes a real problem, because within the workplace with a colleague or someone, you may share something that, if known, could be detrimental for the workplace or your place in it. For example, a little bit of gossip or a secret you learned about the workplace. And while there may be some protections against this, the reputational damage to you in the workplace will definitely persist. Obviously, when we talk about healthy relationships, as trust gets built, sharing vulnerabilities is good. Obviously, walking around with everything in your life bottled up is never good for us. Being open with ourselves and those we trust, feeling whole with those that we love and who are safe, that's a healthy relationship. Unfortunately, in the early phases of the relationship, a narcissistic relationship can often mimic a healthy one. By the time it starts to go upside down, you may have already shared about yourself, your vulnerabilities, mistakes, things that have happened in your past. And so that means the narcissistic person already has the weaponry. It's actually very interesting. I was watching a documentary about the sex cult NXIVM, and one of the weapons they used in this cult was something that they called collateral. In essence, the people who were sort of higher in the cult hierarchy, the more abusive people, they would ask for the cult members to prove their devotion and loyalty to the cult, to the system, by sharing something like a nude photograph or a family secret or other secret that the person would never want to have revealed, as collateral to sort of cement the relationship. Now, let's face it, anyone who's in a cult is too confused to fully understand what's happening to them, and often will buy into this sort of fantastical idea of transparency and trust and belonging and all the stuff that the cults are so good at falsely promising. The cult leaders then put that collateral in their back pocket to use against the member should they decide to speak out or step away from the system or from the cult. Calling it collateral is certainly a fancy and nicer word than calling it what it is, which is extortion. This collateral is, in essence, what anyone in any narcissistic relationship hands over when they share their vulnerabilities, and is what the narcissistic person uses to keep a person trapped in the relationship. The fear that your vulnerabilities will be aired to the world and used against you or to harm people you care about. All narcissistic relationships are cult-like in their organization and structure. It's a small cult, I guess a cult of two in some cases, but a cult nonetheless. To get into these relationships, you were typically groomed, tricked, and your vulnerabilities played upon. It's all just a matter of scale, and that is not a healthy relationship. After a person survives a narcissistic relationship, I will be frank. After you go through that, you're probably not going to be honest and open in the same way again. Trust starts to mean something different. It can take a long time, if ever, for someone to open up in the same way. Some people will save any kind of vulnerable sharing for very carefully curated settings, for example, like therapy. Early in a relationship, you'll already have this lingering doubt. You already play out, like, what would happen if this person turned on me and uses anything I say against me? And for many people who've been through severe narcissistic abuse will decide that not sharing is just easier, that the risk would never be worth it again. People like to say that hurt people hurt people. I'm not buying it. Hurt people who are reactive and egocentric and who lack empathy, they hurt people. Then it isn't really about them being hurt. It's about them being vindictive. Interestingly, after these tantrums, when they use all of your vulnerabilities against you, narcissistic and vindictive folks will often attempt to pass an olive branch and make peace. I wasn't at my best. I was hurt. This trying to fix it is actually hoovering. And they may at this point even future fake promises. We can talk this out. It won't happen again. You can't talk it out, and it will happen again. They will also say things like, don't be mad. Don't be upset with me. And that is because they don't actually really care about your hurt. They just want to mask their own shame and maintain their mask to the world. It's generally not a good look to be the vindictive person. And because narcissistic people are stupid enough to put things in writing, you've got the messages now if you care to show people them. I often think of the bad behavior that a narcissist will engage in these vindictive tantrums as showing their full behavioral repertoire, showing what they're capable of. And for this reason, if people accept the hoovering and the false promises and the let's make nice after one of their sessions of being so abusive and vindictive and using your vulnerabilities against you, there can be some real eggshell walking and some real fear if you do decide to go back. There will always be the fear that they will do this to you again, which is reasonable because they will. And that means that the difficult person in the relationship still holds all of the power. For a variety of trauma-bonded and cognitive dissonance-driven reasons, we want to believe in these relationships. If for some reason you do go back into a relationship where this has happened, move very, very, very tentatively and very carefully. Try that firewalling technique I talked about in another video. Try gray rocking and share nothing that can ever be harmful to you. In essence, you really are living in the truth of a narcissistic relationship. It carves out into something very hollow and superficial because it always was. They will try to bait you to share. Remember, they need your vulnerabilities as the swords and the machetes they use to maintain power in the relationship. And if you don't hand your vulnerabilities over to them, then they will start shaming you for being closed off and being incapable of intimacy and trust and closeness, and portray you as some sort of cut off, friendless, cold, robotic introvert. Remember the mantras of the narcissistic relationship. It won't change, and you can't win. This harnessing of your vulnerabilities to attack you, manipulate you, punish, cajole, and vindicate themselves is the cruelest element of these relationships and is often where a lot of the hurt happens. It is a cautionary tale that in any relationship, really always work towards building lots and lots of trust before you open up about anything, especially if you have a family history of managing narcissistic abuse. If this happens within a family relationship, where they may take advantage of childhood vulnerabilities, be aware it may happen. And remember, it's their shame that is driving this. Don't let it become your shame. But the other thing to remember is you may be wondering, so what happens in a healthy relationship if you share your vulnerabilities? Because not all healthy relationships last forever. And this is what happens in a healthy relationship. Even if for some reason in a healthy relationship you part ways, no healthy person would ever use your vulnerabilities against you. They may just put them aside in their mind and say, okay, that ran its course. Healthy people have empathy, even when things don't work out. They do not define their relationships on the basis of triangulation, manipulation, and vindictiveness. They find a way to regulate their disappointment. There is a big difference. Pay attention to this pattern, because the fact is, it would never show up in a healthy relationship. Thanks again.